This is the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show, and today I'm backstage at Lisk Fest with Tim Lambesis of As I Lay Dying and Austrian Death Machine. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing great.
How did you get connected with Lisk Fest, and what is important about it?
This fest is so close to home for us, and you know, we heard it went great last year. A lot of the bands are the kind of like, they're not quite reunion type bands, but you know, Lisk brings back some of these maybe legendary bands, and needed a headliner maybe to bring in a younger crowd as well, and so just a perfect match, you know, having us drive only an hour from our hometown to be here for a pretty great lineup, I think.
What kind of life foundations did your parents instill in you as a kid?
You know, every kid gets disciplined when there's something very obviously wrong, but the gray area, of course, with every parent is, you know, what exactly is right and wrong on the small stuff. And I think my parents became progressively more, I guess you could say, Christian in their morals the older I got, and I think some of that had to do with maybe I got into more trouble the older I got, and they realized how important some of those morals were. So
what was your original purpose for wanting to perform on stage?
Well, for me, I've always loved music, just sonic, you know, aspects of it. Even you know, it's funny me being a lyricist and a singer, but even just instrumental bands, and you know, regardless of what the lyrical content was, I've always been drawn towards a heavier, more aggressive type of sound. I think the hardest connection for me was all those type of bands really never had a lyrical connection. You know, it was always either too mystical about, you know, typical like dragons and wizards, like metal themes, or it was just so negative that you know, I never felt good listening to it. And so it's a combination of me being drawn towards that aggressive music, but then actually wanting to have something meaningful to say while being on stage.
How did As I Lay Dying form?
You know, to me, songwriters kind of form the band, and everything else kind of fills in from there. And the original lineup wasn't actually a lineup capable of playing live shows. It was myself, who had written a handful of songs, our original guitar player, who was much better at executing my ideas than I was, although he wasn't much of a songwriter, and then Jordan, who, you know, to me, a fantastic drummer, is the backbone of, you know, especially the genre of metal, you know. And so that was where the band started, and then from there we filled out and eventually became a touring band. And you know, we were recording stuff with 2 guitar parts, but we only had 1 guitar player, and so it was just out of necessity that we grew and became a 5-piece. The
first heavy metal album that changed your life?
I feel weird saying this, but the first heavy metal moment that changed my life was actually a song on the radio, because when you think about most kids, they're you know, when you're 11 years old, you can't go to the record store and buy a metal record. Your parents wouldn't let you in the first place, and then how else are you going to hear metal unless you either, you know, so your friend gives you that tape back then, or you hear it on the radio. So I remember hearing, I don't remember if it was Battery or actually Master of Puppets, but I remember it was a song off of Master of Puppets, you know, that I heard when I was like 10 or 11, and that was it. From there, it was like I wanted to find more songs that sounded like that.
When you perform at stadiums and festivals, does watching the faces of the crowd inflate your ego, or does it humble you?
I would say the bigger crowds humble me more than anything.
When you have the realization that you are probably one of the best-selling bands on Metal Blade Records, and that is a legendary metal label, how do you not have an ego?
That's a good question. We've actually we've sold over 1 million records, but we've never had 1 gold record, and kind of seeing history, I think, gives me a perspective that, you know, we matter now, but who knows, you know, where things are going to be in 10 years. And I think that's why we work hard, and every album is a progression for us. But you know, a lot of bands got caught up in like the new metal genre and had gold records or even platinum records, and now they go out and they're almost an embarrassment, you know. And so you know, things change.
How did you come up with the concept for Austrian Death Machine?
Well, Austrian Death Machine was sort of like a passing whim, you know, this crazy idea that came up hanging out with my friends, just goofing around. And I sort of get a thrill out of everybody being like, oh, you know, that would be so funny if you actually did that, but actually being the guy that pulls it off. You know, I think that's hilarious, but not just talking about it, because a lot of people just talk about how there's big plans to do this, and I kind of let it flow under the radar, and then next thing you know, I had a whole album's worth of material out, you know. And I think to me that was part of the fun, and also that the whole outlet of this, you know, just lighthearted side of my personality, you know, because just naturally being an As I Lay Dying, or being in a metal band in general, people just assume you're either a very angry person, or if your lyrics are a little bit more poetic, or they have something to say, that you're a very serious person, you know. Like, you know, to me, you know, we're very down to earth, and part of being down to earth is just having a good sense of humor.
I know that you guys like to play off the fact that Chad Ackerman from Destroy the Runner, he plays Arnold Schwarzenegger. in the record. Now I know that there's a fantasy part of this where you guys like to pretend like it is Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I gotta ask you the question: has Arnold Schwarzenegger heard any of your records? And I wonder what he thinks of it.
Well, I've heard rumors that Arnold has heard the record. This is what I've been told, is that you know, one of the Austrian Death Machine fans has a brother that works you know, works for the government, works at the governor's office up in Sacramento, and showed Arnold the CD, and Arnold thought it was hilarious, but he couldn't understand the words at all. Really? You know, which to me sounds like a very believable answer, although until I actually hear Arnold say something, I don't know if I'll believe it.
The new one, actually, I noticed, like, you got all your friends playing lead guitar on there, but I noticed you got Billy Sheehan playing on one of the songs too. Now, how did that come about? Mike,
who's the president of Metal Blade, he actually has been a you know, lifelong friend of Billy Sheehan's, and I called Mike and I said, look, you know, I've got a couple songs left. You know, I would love to, you know, to get your opinion on who could play on these songs. And I just didn't think, I thought, you know, Billy was too much of a legend to do something, you know, with me at least. And you know, I guess Billy actually really enjoys the band, and so that's how that whole thing came up. But what happened is, because that whole thing was so last minute, I wasn't able to actually get that master in time, so it's coming up for a special release coming up, following up with the Double Brutal. So it's actually it's cool because it's all done and it's ready to go. It's just that nobody's heard it yet.
Were you surprised by the success of the Austrian Death Machine CD?
Yeah, that's the success was a huge surprise, just because I did it originally for fun, and you know, I wanted my friends and me to be able to be involved and kind of laugh about something, and but at the same point, like, you know, take pride in it and make it sound good. I own my own studio, so why not, you know? And
yeah.
You know, I thought it would have a cult following, and I think it does have a cult following, but it's a large cult following.
How much fun was it for you to cover such metal classics by such bands as Metallica, Motorhead, the Misfits, Megadeath, and Judas Priest?
Well, I've always been looking for an excuse to cover some of those songs, you know, and the fact that they were so closely related to Arnold movies. I mean, Metallica's Trapped Under Ice was almost exactly like Mr. Freeze and Batman and Robin, you know, which is one of the most ridiculous roles that Arnold ever played, and so I think it just brings those lyrics in like the perfect context.
Redoing these songs, like a Misfits song, they're just so legendary.
It's funny because the Misfits, to me, have always been like a punk band, very simple, you know, but they've influenced bands like Metallica somehow, you know, and so it reminds me that it's not always about like how crazy, you know, the guitar players and how much the drummer shreds. You know, it's sometimes just about writing a good song. And the Misfits, I put definitely my own little twist on there to make it a little more fun and fitting for the band.
Will you be taking Double Brutal on the road?
Some small plans, you know, like a week on the West Coast, and I'm planning a week on the East Coast to do kind of the major cities. But at some point, I think I'd like to do a festival type tour, where I think that, you know, when you see all these bands that kind of seem the same, and then this one band gets on stage and it's like they're over the top, you know, they're actually having fun, they're laughing, you know. I think in that type of atmosphere, you know, Austrian Death Machine would really stand out.
How do your interpersonal relationships work out on the road when you're touring with bands that don't subscribe to Christianity?
One perspective that I have that's maybe different than a lot of Christians is that even Christians should question what it is they believe, to be able to come to a point to where at least they understand why that's where they stand, you know. And a lot of Christians just sort of blindly believe because their pastor told them, or it's the kind of household they grew up in. And I think that if anybody, regardless of what they believe, has an argument, I don't mean like argue like, you know, fighting. I mean argue like, you know, like a very thoughtful discussion for why they've come to the conclusion that they have, then you know, there should be respect there. You know, with the guys in Lamb of God, I mean, they have a very different point of view than me, but at the same point, you know, we can intelligently speak about, you know, what matters most in my life. It doesn't mean that I have to draw a line in the sand like this is the Crusades or something, you know, that like Muslims should kill Christians or something like that, you know.
The Blairing Out Show.